Hi, everybody. Welcome to another great episode of Real Talk. Today, we're jumping back into supply chain with one of the founders of EMSNow. Philip Stoten is one of the innovators today. They've taken our industry and put it on video, started many years ago. And as myself, I'm trying to come at the new present day. He has the wisdom, he has the relationships, and they're doing. EMSNow is doing some great things with bringing a lot of the C-level people talking about industrial revolution of technology into manufacturing services, supply chain. I mean, fascinating things that we're going to learn. I'm so excited to have him on the show today. Welcome, Philip Stoten. Philip, welcome
Hey, Rob.
to Real Talk. As I said, you're all the way from Australia.
Yeah, great to be here. Having me on the show. Yeah, I'm in Melbourne, Australia right now. It's bright and early in the morning. So
yeah, thank you so much for taking your time, your busy day, starting in the morning. As I said, I've been really geeking out, nerding out a lot of your content. It's been so fascinating, just like a recent one. If people don't know, you did one with Dan Ackray from TTI and Dale from ECIA. You get listen out today. That was great. You know, very, as I said, the way you articulate, the way actually you and Eric, I think you and Eric were on that one. And really, you know what? Before we get into that, get all this fun stuff, I really, let the audience a little learn about yourself. Who is Phil? How did you get here? You know, where you started from?
Yeah. Well, I started my career as a PCB designer of all things way back in the 1980s, actually, around Cambridge when there was all kinds of computer revolution going on there. I did my postgraduate studies in electronic engineering. I spent like 18 years, I guess, in electronic manufacturing myself. So started in design, went through production, all kinds of different roles, was production director of a PLC in the UK that made industrial computer equipment that went into abattoirs and all kinds of hostile environments. And then in the mid-90s, switched to publishing, started my own magazine in the PCB industry, which I sold to one of the newspaper groups, and then did various different things in publishing. In 2002, we launched EMSNow. And really from that, spent more and more time writing about the industry that I'd spent my early part of my career growing up in. So the whole EMS industry has been kind of a passion all my career. And my second passion is journalism. So to be able to roll both into one career has been fantastic.
Oh, I mean, that's, as I said, it's fascinating how you got there. Was the electronics a family thing for you? Was it a family background?
No, it was the strangest thing. I started when I was at school. I was studying design and drafting and that side of things, and I thought maybe I wanted to become an architect or do something like that. And I went to work for a small outsourced drafting company, a design company that did various different things. And I designed a couple of swimming pools. I did a couple of other things. And then they kept saying, can you do some of this PCB design? Can you do some of this electronics work? Because 80% of the inbound inquiries they were getting were in electronics. And I just dropped into that and found that was a niche that I enjoyed and something that was really exciting. And at the time, it was just moving so fast in the UK that before I knew it, that was the career that chose me rather than the career I chose.
I mean, yeah, you were in the beginning of the technology revolution, electronics, everything exciting, and so I mean, that's right from the history aspect. So you were in UK, and then how did you come in Australia?
Yeah, well, that's a long story. It was a girl, as it turns out. I got married here in 2018, but I lived and worked most of my career in the UK and traveled a lot through Europe, worked in different places in Europe. And then in 2016, we decided to leave London and move to California. I was doing more and more of the marketing support work. So although I started EMSNow and founded that, most of what I do now is within the organization that we call Scoop. And Scoop provides content consultancy, content strategy, and content marketing. So we got quite a few customers in the UK. We were starting to develop customers, particularly in California. So I moved to California and thought, okay, let's see how this develops. Moved to Venice in LA, enjoyed that for a while, ended up moving from there down to Guadalajara in Mexico, which is just a huge epicenter of contract manufacturing, like 100,000 people working in contract manufacturing in one city. Spent some time there, spent a couple of months up in Montreal, back to Milan in Europe, which is my wife's Italian. So we spent some time there, and then we moved back here in I guess about August 2018, and we've been here ever since. And normally I would be every 2 months. I spend a couple of weeks in California, and then I spend a little bit of time in Europe every few months. But this year I have not flown since mid-February, so it's the longest, I think, in 30 years that I've been in one country without getting on a plane. Absolutely surreal.
Likewise, it's been about 20. This is the longest I've been traveling, 25 years. I mean, it's way. I mean, everybody travel. I mean, as a business, I mean, just your history of where you travel to, where you've been to. I mean, I think culture for you, different areas, and really is pushing you to, new landscape. You want to go to here. You came to California, you went to Guadalajara, complete different culture with landscape. And then back to Montreal. I mean, these are things that you've been all over, back to UK, Milan, and now Australia. I'd really give you some insight, especially if you're following the manufacturer, been in the journalistic or manufacturing, seeing the different landscapes. And really doesn't change the manufacturing. It's just everybody has their own culture of how they process things. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, it is completely different everywhere you go, and certainly when I look at the EMS industry, which has been the big industry that I've covered and been watching for 20 years as it's gone through these various revolutions. There's a different culture in Europe than the US, and the US has some of the very large dominant global players, and again, it's different in Asia as well. And what I've seen kind of layered over that is this shift towards digital transformation that's occurred in the last, say, 7 years since it was introduced at Hannover Messe by Fraunhofer and some of the German institutes that put that whole concept together. And it's been really interesting to see how that's shifted around the world, because I think when we were first talking about that in Europe, I would travel to the US and I would say to people, hey, what does your Industry 4.0 strategy look like? And this would be a $10 billion contract EMS company. And they'd go, industry what? What's that about? And actually, I think the first few years of it were a lot about explaining what it meant. And now I think people are starting to walk the walk. And I think what's really interesting is this year has set up a whole bunch of new dynamics around reshoring, around supply chain resilience, supply chain agility that play directly into digital transformation. So there's an acceleration.
Oh yeah, I want to dig into that stuff with you, and I want to step back a little bit first and really see, as a writer, journalist, going around, understanding a lot of with the factories, understanding how they operate, just like you said, industrial 3 from 3.0, 4. That's the revolution of processes. Really, what gives your inspiration? Like, who was your role model to really push you and give you the motivation to do this? That's really what I want to say, is how did this come to the excitement of manufacturing?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? I guess I kind of drifted into manufacturing. As I said, when I first started in design, I didn't choose electronics. It kind of chose me because it was the market that was moving. When I look at when I was young, I had role models who were journalists, which were generally the journalists that were working for the BBC. It was people like Kate Adie, who was a war journalist, and she was, the journalist with the blue flak jacket with press written on it that would be on the front line in all these different conflicts. And I just love the idea of being able to tell a story, and tell a story well, and tell a story that you understand. And when I write, the passion comes from having an understanding and a background in the industry, and actually seeing how change can be good for the industry, and change can be good for not just the people that own the businesses, but the people that work in the businesses, the consumers, everybody involved in that. And then you start to overlay things like sustainability and see what that impact is. And it's exciting stuff. And some people say, it's not like it was in the good old days. These are the good old days of manufacturing. It's really moving fast and it's exciting. And if you're in the CapEx business or if you're in the services business and you can be creative with what you're delivering to the manufacturing world, people are ready to listen at the moment. So it's an exciting time. And if I look over just the last, just since the turn of the millennium, you look at how the industry has changed, the rise of companies like Foxconn, the amount of stuff that is outsourced now, the impact that has on the way products are fulfilled to customers, the whole buying experience. It's phenomenal and it's changed substantially. And I'm absolutely convinced that in the 20s, it's going to change even more. It's going to be really, really switched up.
Yeah, I think this what we're in, this pandemic has really accelerated us 2 to 3 years, put us, and we have to move. I mean, I think the technology, digital transformation was there. It just wasn't being, there's some resistance to change. As you feel that yourself. There's some countries are very forward and some are just, if it works, don't fix it until we have, it happens.
Until it doesn't work, yeah.
It doesn't work anymore, or it's not competitive anymore. Then we have to go back, and at that point, we're behind. It's like in any industry. If you get to that point, you're already behind. If you're not thinking forward, so it's so fascinating. You're learning all about the information. I can see where you just talking about your enthusiasm behind what you learned, you've gone through, seeing it's coming out. I can see that.
Yeah.
The questions to me, someone who really, I have a lot of gratitude for that. It's like, that's what we want to learn as a journalist. Because you also write for Forbes, right? You write for Forbes.
And Forbes. I just had a thing published yesterday on entrepreneur, which was called The Big Reset for Manufacturing, which is a piece I wrote kind of positioning where we are now and what companies need to be looking at in 2021. So it's been a great, I think when I look at the value I bring to customers, but it's also the value that I've been able to gain from my time in the industry. It's just that experience of understanding what's going on, this fantastic network of people. I set out that, you mentioned the EMS at Sea Level series, which I launched when we were stuck in the first stages of the pandemic back in March. But that's allowed me to speak to, I think, about 37, 38 CEOs of EMS companies and supply chain companies, anywhere from, a multi-billion-dollar OEM or EMS right down to smaller creative companies that are coming up with solutions. And that's been brilliant. The value of the network is great. And we just launched a series really recently called What's the Scoop? And it's something I've done in the past where I just pick a topic and I reach out to a few execs and ask them about the topic. But what I did last month is we kind of formalized that into the What's the Scoop 50. And it's 50 arbitrarily chosen by me, but 50 influential and interesting people in the electronic manufacturing industry. So I create a question every month, I share it with them, and then I collate their answers into articles. The last one got published in 7 different publications, which was great, in different versions. And it was talking about what the manufacturing industry needs from the next president. So it was a nice, timely piece. But that's something that it just gives me so much impetus, but it also gives me so much insight into what different people in the industry are thinking.
I mean, that's policy. That's like genius. If you can have that, you get that connection and asking a simple one question, and you collect data. At the end of the day, I mean, we are data driven. People don't realize today, even important than ever, data is so important. And just getting people's opinions and collecting that data together and formulating it. And you can see, a lot of people, you said majority are in the same realm, but some are not. So it's always see that both sides are multiple, it could be 4-sided, 3-sided, 2-sided, to see all sides and people's opinions and foresight, and you can bring them together and then bring them to a platform and, as you say, put them into a publication or do a podcast or do a video, bring them on. I mean, what you're doing is you are paving the way into the industry of, as I said, you guys started this a long time ago from trade shows, correct?
We would. It first started way back. I guess we've been doing that probably the best part, well, maybe even more than 10 years. What we would do is, as a journalist, you go to a trade show and you spend some time with various different people and you learn lots, and you end up bringing huge amounts of notes home to write lots of different pieces. And I thought this just isn't that efficient. So what we decided to do was set up a video studio at the trade show, bring out a couple of cameras and a crew, and we would interview people on the show floor. And that was kind of the very early start. We would do it on our own booth, or we would maybe do it on our client's booth, or as a guest on one of the larger booths. And sometimes I'd be asked to moderate panels on those booths anyway. And then we kind of created this Scoop Studio model, which was to have a back wall behind us with some logos on. So we had a sponsorship model. And I think the last one we did, which would have been Apex in February this year, we shot over 3 days, maybe 40 interviews, something like 18 shows. We'll go like a 10-minute cadence on interviews. So we're just cranking people through. Eric would do the Eric Biscoe show, which you mentioned earlier, every day from the booth. We would have a couple of people in the industry that have their own podcast that would come and guest and shoot them on the booth. And it's just great. You come away from the show with it, having learned so much, and having that material pretty ready for consumption. So you could then, crank through those, put out a video every day for the next, 2 to 3 months. So it's
you're
awesome.
business content, creating content. You have to have and book it out and have, ourselves, I'm learning as we go. It's been about a year learning the content price. You have to have content. You have to cut it up and produce a post-production and bring it together. But as I said, it is kind of paving the path, because the new generation coming, the way we read, there's a lot of great journals and stuff out there, but also video, because our cell phone, the video, everything is gone through video these days. So everybody's connected. They just want to tune out. They don't want to read. They get eyes. I'll just listen to something. I'll listen to or I'll watch a video. And that, I think, even in as electronics manufacturing or hardware, as you say, assembly is kind of, old school, as you say, but we are coming to the new platform, meaning like the demographic, the way of change is the software is all ahead. They're all there, but we are slow to change, but we're coming up. And I think that you started something back then, even with those trade shows, creating the content, creating video, that today it's going to start quantifying even. You're going to start doing it faster. And you were first to market, as I say, one of the first to market. And now you have the network and going forward, and you can create something in the future, because as I said, for me, myself, the Real Talk was also to build network and also build affluence, but also build awareness.
Brand awareness.
Awareness, and also awareness of the industry. Who are we? What do we do? These people of these companies, just like you're doing, you bring on all the C-level, you're doing it, you guys, excellent job, all the C-level. Who are they? Who are these leaders? And for myself, when I ran into yourself, I'm like, who is Philip Stoten? Like, what is his story, and how tell story? So how did he get here, and what is his insights? And that's, for me, it's like, oh, I want to learn. There's wisdom there. We all have to go through a lot of trials and tribulations in life. You have to learn. I'm part of the newer generation coming into this and understanding what we can do, and learning from people like yourself and all the people of really where we started from, where we are, and what's the future and how we can work together to bring in a talent pool, new technology, new awareness.
And we want that talent pool there. We want more kids to get into STEM education. We want more people to get into manufacturing and the media that relates to it. And I think what's really interesting, Rob, as you were going through that, it was making me think that actually we've learned stuff during this pandemic. We've learned new stuff during this pandemic. For us, before the pandemic, we were kind of blitzing those videos at those 3-day trade shows and doing a whole bunch of them and then rolling them out over a period. Now we're doing them in a much more scheduled way. When I first did the EMS at C-level, I did maybe 3 a week to begin with. And now we're doing, maybe 1 or 2 a week, and we're picking very carefully which ones we do. But we've learned this year, and we talked about, both of us, not traveling. We've learned this year what we can do without traveling and how we can still make that connection. Maybe you and I would have met at a trade show. We would have gone out and had a beer. It would have been a lot of fun. You get to do all that. But we've still managed to create a bond by by doing Zoom calls, by being able to communicate through platforms like this, by really leveraging LinkedIn, which I think as you know, those digital tools have really come into their own. And when I look at it from not just my point of view and the way we promote our brand, but what we do with customers, they've learned a lot from it as well. When I look at people's marketing plans prior to the pandemic, they were very dependent on trade shows. They were the big flagpole events every few months that they would see as key parts to their marketing plan, super expensive parts to their marketing plan as well, incidentally. And what we did, again, very early in the process, is said to people, hey, you know, if you've got a trade show that has been cancelled, come talk to us. We'll give you 2 hours free consultancy. Tell us what you expected from that trade show in terms of thought leadership, in terms of lead generation, in terms of communication with existing customers. And the last one is media contact. So give us the deliverables in those 4 bundles. And we can maybe create a plan that's a lot more economic than a trade show. That allow you to do that. You know, maybe we'll say, hey, go talk to Rob, go get on Rob's show. That's going to give you some thought leadership coverage. Let's pitch an article to a particular publication, because that's going to give you some coverage there. How many media were you going to meet at a trade show? Can we set those meetings up for you online? Can we pitch something to those publications? And what I think is unique is when we've done stuff for our clients in terms of marketing, we don't just say, hey, this is out there in the market, go do that. And we do some of that. So we'll pitch people for, I don't know, a panel at South by Southwest or CES or somewhere like that. But if there isn't something for them, we'll create it. We'll say, hey, let's put a panel together about the use of artificial intelligence in the EMS industry. And let's get you on that with people that we think it's good for you to network with. So, you know, the pandemic's been horrible. It's been tragic, but we've learned from it, and it's created some real shifts. Some of them will change the way we market forever. I don't think trade shows could just switch back on straight after and expect the same investment from their exhibitors.
Yeah, it'll be more of a hybrid, it's a hybrid model that we'll go into. Even though actually my company in China, Shenzhen, they had Electronica South China. We had a big they had over, I don't know how many 100,000, over, I don't know how many people, lots of people, thousands of people were there. We had a lot of people come and go. And yeah, because I think, as you know, it's just a different country. They have their own protocols.
Yeah, different culture.
Yeah, different culture. And it worked. I mean, I was even impressed. You know, I was like, wow, I can't believe it's the only trade show we got to do this year, and everything virtual. But I want to take a step back when we brought up the trade shows in general. Yeah, everything has changed. But once again, just like you said, the trade shows, you do so much content, so many meetings, 10 minutes, hundreds of people, not even thousands. But how can you remember everything? You write notes, but it's a lot. You're inundated, right? You're inundated with all this information. Sometimes it doesn't come through clearly, and that relationship that you wanted to build wasn't there because there wasn't enough time, and it just falls through the hoops. And that's one thing a trade show is good for: meeting people or seeing products or tangible feeling you're meeting. But also, we really realize that virtual is also good as well. Content marketing, creating a market over the product, and having webinars or podcasts or having a panel online talking about a technology can get just as much viewers or even more viewers than you would ever have.
Well, more viewers. You know, if we go to a trade show, Rob, 9 times out of 10, we've got to pick the track that we want to go to. And as someone that really wants to see as much as they can on the show floor and see as much as they can of the conference content, and, you know, meet as many people as they can possibly meet, there's just too much to do in such a short time. So when you take that online and you make it much more on demand, then you're able to consume more. You're able to be more focused on what you consume. You're able to cherry pick. And from a speaker point of view, for example, and that's why I love webinars so much, is if I go to a conference and I speak to an audience of 100 people, if a dozen people come up to me afterwards and give me their card and talk to me about what I've been presenting, that's really good. I've done really well. I've got 10 or 12 leads from that, or 10 or 12 meaningful contacts. If I do a webinar, I've got the registration list. if I can put a gate in for an on-demand platform in terms of the video, I'll continue to pick up leads afterwards on that. And even if I haven't got it gated, maybe it's on my LinkedIn page and people will comment on it and that'll come up in my notifications. I've got that digital trail of everything I'm doing. And I think that's increasingly important and increasingly valued by people in the marketing sphere. So this this warm feeling you get at a trade show where there's been a reasonable footfall on the booth and it seems to have been busy and there's been a bit, it's been fun, but nobody can really tangibly say this is the value that's delivered. I think there are some fundamental issues there that need addressing. I don't think trade shows are going to go away because I think there's certainly requirements for them, but they need to understand the virtual world and try and bring those things together. So I think there are lots of options there. And the last thing I'd say on that is that when you look at the economics of a trade show, so much of the money that is paid by the exhibitor doesn't make its way to the organizer. So much of the money is spent on furniture rental, on travel, on accommodation, on executive time. You might spend $100,000 at a trade show and it might be worth 10 grand to the organization, which might be an association or something that you're working with that owns that trade show. Whereas if you can do something with them that's much more direct, that has much more value, you can maybe spend 20 grand and they can maybe get 15 grand out of that, because all you're paying is your couple of $100 a month for your Zoom membership or your WebEx or whatever else you're using. So the economics are different as well.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. I cannot agree more. And it's funny to say, you said like 90% or 80% of your spend is going elsewhere, not to the actual organization who put this thing together, brought these thousands of people together. And that's just the model that was there. And as you say, is the model obsolete? It has to evolve. It's not obsolete. I mean, it just has to evolve into a.
It has to evolve.
It has to evolve. And one thing is the reach. And at the end of the day, like Electronica right now, one of the biggest electronic shows is happening right now. But I don't know how their reach is right now or how the audience retention is, but still it's a little change because that is a Goliath, and a lot of people do that show and a lot of people do. Can you get that type of thing over virtual? No. But my thing is, you can curate it to certain things that you really want to cut, because usually that's like a CES. I call it electronics, like the CES of hard, like
the hardware industry,
right? Yeah. CS is the consumer side, and you got Electronica is the hardware side, and that's the fun. Everybody knows how it's more of like networking. Everybody gets together. There's so many different things happening at the same time. You can't see everything so big, but can we make that to a smaller scale and make it smaller into a virtual platform where you can, pivot it off? These organizers say, you know what, we're going to just do power. It's going to be a power segment. Everybody's in power. Yeah. Sensing will be here. Someone about IoT, they get into medical or defense, so they can spread it out, and the people and the eyes can go to that. And in my opinion, there'd be more retention. There'd be more awareness of the product. So this is the evolution. And I know all these organizers are doing it or trying to follow that pattern. But right now it's so new. No one knows what platform to use, how to get them,
And they've got a business model. You talk about Electronica and alternating every other year with Productronica. That's a huge event. That's run by MMG, Messe München GmbH. They're, I think, almost half owned by the state of Bavaria, almost half owned by the city of Munich, and a fairly modest private ownership in there. So their business model is to fill a multi-million-dollar exhibition space they built. It's to get people into the city. It's to get people into Bavaria. So there are lots of other dynamics going on there, and lots of organizations that actually exist within Messe München that provide furniture, that provide flowers, catering, all those kind of things. There's a whole bunch of hotels. You talk about 100,000 people. I think typically there would be 100,000 people in the city for that event. That's a lot of hotel rooms. So there's a social impact. There's a economic impact for the region. But if you just boil it down to the marketing tools, there are definitely good economic marketing tools that can replace or augment that. And I suspect when people look at electronica again in 2022, they'll be saying, okay, well, this is what we did in 2018, and this is the success we got from that. We couldn't go in 2020, so we did this, and this is what it cost us, and this is the success we got from that. What are we going to do in 2022? And it's probably going to be, as you say, Rob, that hybrid model where you say, maybe we're going to have a smaller booth where we focus on hospitality. Maybe we're going to have the best coffee or the best beer or the best pretzels there, which will get people to our booth. And maybe most of that thought leadership content we're going to do on demand and online. So people that are there can access it when they go home, and we can just spend our time networking. So I think people's ideas of how those shows work is going to change because by nature of the pandemic, they've had to question the process.
Yeah, I mean, you really nailed it. Going back to that is all the things affected, the supply chain, everything affected directly to the organization. That hurts. I mean, unfortunately, the pandemic has economically hit many businesses.
Yeah.
I think 30% are excelling. Then that 60% are. Transition. Yeah. How do you do that from a hospitality side, from a service side to servicing things from for shows globally? It's a global. Yeah. It's a global thing, but hopefully everybody evolves, moves more efficient at the end of the day in the jobs. But moving to that is really after the trade shows, I really want to dive into is really what you've seen with the article you actually read, Entrepreneur, which I read it. Don't worry, I read your Entrepreneur. It says basically it's a big reset in supply chain.
Yeah.
Right? There's a big reset. So I'd like to dive into that now. It's like, what have you with networking with all the C-levels, talking to all the people the last 8 months, really what have you seen as the big shift in the reset in the supply chain?
Well, when I look at supply chain and what's happened this year, what we've exposed is some fundamental issues. So the two things we really want out of our supply chain, and it's absolutely clear that we want as a result of the pandemic, are agility and resilience. We want a supply chain that's agile and we can move from location to location, and we want something that's resilient. The challenge is that the industry has set itself up in the model of building capacity and expecting people to come. So you've got very large contract manufacturers that have very large campuses at all kinds of places around the world. Now, what they are trying to do, and they're always acting in the best interest of their customers, trying to put the jobs in the places or the projects in the places that are best for those customers. But at the end of the day, they've got capacity to fill, and they're only successful if they've got good utilization. So this capacity-driven model is forcing jobs into places where there's space. And currently a lot of that might be China, and actually a lot of people perhaps want to shift their supply chain elsewhere for all kinds of economic reasons and all kinds of other reasons in terms of supporting the recovery or creating more resilience in the supply chain or reducing dependence. So you've got this very capacity-driven model. What you've seen happening over the last few years is some more demand-driven models occur. So when you look at companies like Xometry, Fictive, Macrofab, 3D Hubs, companies like that have these digital manufacturing ecosystems, they're able to deliver something that's much more demand-driven. And then you've got companies like PCH International or consultants like Riverwood Solutions that are very much on the customer side, and they're working with manufacturing partners to design the right supply chain for them. And they're almost acting as consultancy services. So they're very much, demand-driven, working on that side. So I think there's a reset there. So you've got an industry that's grown up with a certain mindset. You've got a very turbulent year of different dynamics. And when you look to 2021, you've got to figure out, well, what's the industry the OEMs need, what's the industry the brands need, and what's the industry the consumers need, because the consumers want this frictionless process from purchase all the way to fulfillment. They want that wonderful out-of-box experience that is so important with brands now. There's that shift from bricks and mortar to online, so that's become important. So there are so many dynamics, and the part of all of those solutions is digital transformation. So it's digital transformation of the purchasing process, the fulfillment process, digital transformation on the factory floor, on the way the supply chain's managed. But it's just creating, we just need to create an industry that's much more agile and much more flexible, and that does meet the demands of the brands and the consumer.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you hit a lot of points there. Going back to just the digital transformation of using digital, like the industries 3.0, 4.0 now, moving forward even farther than that, and how companies direct capacity, how they're using technology to see how much capacity they have, to increase efficiency, to reduce manpower, especially what country they're in. Just like you said, some places are built, some countries are built for capacity. They have a lot of people, so they can have capacity. Some others they don't. So automation sometimes is, and the number one thing is people don't realize that, I mean, I'm in US, but automation was one of the big reasons we have a lot of less manufacturing jobs here. It wasn't just offshoring. Automation is a big thing, and that's not talked about a lot. That automation has changed jobs because things got smarter. Machines, robots can do these jobs. They can do it faster, especially in the auto industry. A lot of it, is hybrid both, but it's still, machines have taken over a lot of those, the manual labor jobs. And going to Asia, same thing. There's a lot of it. Yes, there's a lot of labor, a lot of free and low cost labor. They have skilled labor there, and also they have automation. At the end of the day, these big contractors, they say Foxconn, Jabil, Venus, they can't be very successful with profit margin. As we know, as I'm in the industry, you're in the industry, the margins are very low. They're just volume.
Yeah, they're thin. Yeah.
They're thin. So you can't have, so automation is a big factor. But then capacity, what from my experience is you just can't move capacity from one country.
Not quickly.
You can move it, as everybody says, move to Mexico. Mexico is great, but the problem is I think they're right now at the cusp of, they don't have enough resources to handle all the manufacturing happening. They don't have enough contractors who help. If you build a widget, you need a lot of external people around you that have the hardware, the screws,
you need a supply chain.
The supply chain is not there. And as people say, oh, you can just move the factory here. I'm like, you just can't move a factory from, say, China to Mexico. And if you don't have a supply chain, you're just importing all the goods. A lot of cost logistics, a lot of digital things come into play. And for simplifying that for most people out there, so people ask me, it's like, whoa, what, they're moving everything back to US? I'm like, wait, it's not, doesn't happen.
Wait.
wait. Let me explain to you how supply chain works and how factories can move. They want to move somewhere. There is a sustainable supply chain, indirect materials that can come into them, not just move a plant. So there is a lot of that onshore.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. I mean, we can go.
There's a lot.
You can go.
There's a lot. But there's a lot to unpack, and I think there are a few fundamental things. So when you look at China specifically, but I think Asia generally, I always say Asia kicked down the door with low-cost labor. That's how they got in, but they kept the door open by having fantastic logistics, fantastic supply chain, fantastic infrastructure in their country for industrial planning. And they don't have elections every 4 years, so they're not concerned with that. They can create an industrial policy like Made in China 2025, which they created, I don't know, maybe five years ago, and they can just stick to it and they'll do it. And that has allowed them to become that dominant force, and that's why $4 trillion worth of goods are manufactured in China. Then take the dynamic of the current story of reshoring and the US and the political debate around manufacturing and around supporting manufacturing and maybe using tariffs and some protectionist policies to try and get jobs back to the US. Not really the ideal in my opinion, but trying to create a more dynamic and sustainable manufacturing industry for the US. I do think that can be done, and I do think automation is part of that answer, and I think digital transformation is a lot of that answer. So if you can have a more digitally transformed industry, then the fact that you've got proximity to consumer is huge advantage for the US. The fact that you've got Proximity to innovation is another huge advantage to the US. You've got access to capital. You're in a great position in the US to be able to have a sustainable manufacturing industry. And those are industries that will create sustainable jobs that are valuable, jobs that will endure, and jobs that aren't a threat, because you take away the competitive aspect of super low cost labor. So the more of that you can put in, and most industrial revolutions create more jobs than they take away. That's always been the case. And there's demand for people to program those robots. There is demand for people to manage those factory floors, manage those supply chains. So as you look at the digital transformation going from machine to machine, going from business process to business process, going right through to the supply chain, it adds value. It will make the US more competitive. It will hopefully shorten supply chains, because shortened supply chains are great for the planet and are much more sustainable. And it'll create a manufacturing industry that is fit for this next decade, and it will deliver the innovation that we need it to deliver quickly to the consumer. And we've already seen examples of it. Things like PPE have really tested the supply chain, and it's been those demand-led companies that have been really successful in helping out with that. And new technologies like 3D printing being used to make nasal swabs and all kinds of different products very, very quickly. So you've already seen the benefit of that digital transformation. And if it can accelerate innovation and bring products to market quicker, then it's gonna thrive in the future.
I cannot agree more. And that's one thing, the digital transformation, again, that brings data. The more data we have, the more calculated decision we can make of, hey, does this make sense producing this product here?
Yeah.
In any countries, and make it, because there's sources, we can do all the data analytics, we can put it together. Our cost, at the end of the day, it comes to cost. We're in the business to make money. So they have to go, especially if there's a public company, the shareholders, can we do this here? Does it make sense? Because there's also a back and forth of logistics. As you said, the closer proximity geographically, the better it is. Lead times are shorter. Things are fast. You can, and when there's products could defect, things can happen. It could go back and forth from the OEM or to the EMS or the supplier much faster. But of course,
the big word there is data. You mentioned data. Data is the oil of the future. Data is that commodity that the world is going to be most consumed by and most concerned about. And we need to manage that data really well in manufacturing and in the supply chain. And if we can do that, and we can do it at speed, then we'll do really well. The challenge with data is that we produce a huge amount of it. So we have to somehow protect the user from complexity, because it's just too much to deal with. And that's where new technologies like AI are really successful. So if you can use AI to protect someone from the complexity of the data, deliver exactly the data they need in a dashboard, and offer solutions, you can then augment that operator to make better decisions every day. And as that operator's making better decisions, it's teaching the AI as well, and you get to a situation where you have a level of autonomy where you manage by exception. So when everything's going swimmingly, the system can take care of itself. When something strange happens, like this year where a lot of things strange happened, then the operator, who has this incredible skill set, can then take the data that has been filtered and managed and collected by the system and make better decisions. And what I think is really important with that, and I go back to this time and time again, I go to CES every year, so this will be the first year that I haven't gone. I go to CES every year and I write about all the new technologies that are there. And they're generally new technologies to do things that we do without even thinking. So you think of all the things in the smart home that all this great technology does, makes complex decisions like what level do I need to have the lighting at when I've got the drapes open at a certain level and the sun's in a certain position. We do that in a heartbeat. That's instantaneous to us. And I always come away from CES thinking, technology is great, but people are freaking awesome. We are just the most the most amazing technology, the most amazing computer, the most amazing sensors. We're able to take a huge amount of data and we're able to process it. So if we can use technology to augment us, protect us from too much complexity, which will overwhelm us, give us the right data, then we can do an even better job. And I think that relationship between digital transformation and the human operator, I think is increasingly important.
Oh yeah, I kind of agree more. I mean, the AI, just like you hit those AI. I mean, AI is been around now for quite a while. People don't realize that AI is around. It's just advancing. It's getting smarter.
Yeah,
It's getting
fast.
more and faster. Supercomputing is huge. It's a huge
Yeah,
industry. You know, Nvidia, AMD, and so these guys are all this.
yeah.
People don't
But
realize.
it's available to everybody. It's available to small organizations that can tap in using Microsoft Azure or using one of these existing platforms, or through IBM Watson, and do the stuff that they never dreamed of being able to do, and not having to put 100 software engineers on to do that, but actually being able to tap into really good platforms. So there's an accessibility, there's a democratization of some of those technologies, which again I think is super exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting, especially when it helps, quantify the supply chain, how fast you can move things, how you can move product from here to there, but also comes into what we're facing, just like these natural disaster, pandemic, or flood things. I mean, as you know, in Japan, AKM factory just got hit. They make all the D8 DACs, they make all digital auto converters. I mean, they all the dies. I mean, what happens when that happens? And for they say 1 year. I mean, now it's like running to fix something that it's at past tense. It's happened. How do we fix?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
lead times are going to go out 6 months to 1 year now to get product, and
yeah.
it slows everything
And
down.
we can't have those. We can't have those individual dependencies.
Yeah.
That's a problem we've got in the supply chain that we've definitely got to fix. And that's a challenge the semiconductor industry is facing, because when you look at building a semiconductor foundry, you're talking about billions, not millions, in terms of capex. So there are big challenges there. So we have to fix those dependencies in the industry. The last thing I think that's really exciting that's happening in terms of the way the industry operates, and again, this is being accelerated by the pandemic, is some of the business models we're seeing. So we've talked about, we've seen a whole lot of stuff going on in software as a service and the servicification of various parts of the industry. But now we're starting to see that in things like robotics and in connectivity and different areas of digital transformation. So the idea of having robotics as a service where you can see a really tangible return on investment for a particular period, and you actually, almost like hiring a team of robots to do a specific job. And that means it moves from capex to opex, and I think that's creating opportunity. Because at the moment, when I talk to CEOs of EMS companies, the two dynamics they're dealing with is they've got a board that's saying you need to be really careful with capex because we need to maintain cash levels at the moment, because we don't have visibility, we see risk. And the second dynamic is you need to move forward quickly on digital transformation. Well, they're kind of jarring with each other unless the people that are offering you digital transformation can do it as a service. I spoke to a French company recently that had a AI-driven procurement service. That service was purely charged at a small percentage of the money they saved. So once your internal system had got the best price for a product, this AI system went to work. If it got a better deal, you'd purchase at that better price. And at the end of the year, it would say, hey, we saved you $75,000. Your bill's $25,000.
Wow.
If we saved you nothing, it cost you nothing. And it just sat in the background. It didn't cause you any problems. So as we see those dynamic models appear in the market, I think that's going to spark some acceleration as well.
Well, it comes to, I mean, if you go to supply for component side, the pricing is one thing, as everything is digitally online. Everybody's a lot of aggregators online now.
API,
Yeah, a lot of people coming together, the APIs coming together. It's very easy to get the bills of materials quoted quickly, get the cost. But at the end of the day, it's too, is when you go to the tier one, especially tier one, tier two, there are pricing that you don't see on the screen. You can't have a AI crawl a website to pull that, because those are negotiated 50% to 70% of what the retail price usually is. These are things that we get into, saying there's a lot of the PPV side getting down to the point of products, because everybody's trying to reduce costs somehow. The operating expense of running the factory, people, all these type of expenses, and then it comes to component costs. And what are the costs? Can we get some things down? Because as you know, Flex, Sanmina, Jabil, they have a lot of integrated data systems that they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to do this. But at the end of the day, as you probably know as well, I've been to some of them, and they actually still have people going through Excel.
They still got to pick up the phone and see if they can get a deal on a component.
They're using a million different SKUs, 10 million different SKUs, but they're still going sometimes one by one to get that. Because at the end of the day, still they have to get, and how we're not even there yet for the data to systems to really talk to each other. I know a lot of the local guys here, like DigiKey in States and Mauser, they're trying to really integrate people's supply chain and have the pricing structure, and they'll be this. So they're really innovating, trying to do the API integrations. Like, we'll be your warehouse. You can pull everything from us. We'll store it. Which costs the EMS less money, because cash flow, a lot of things people don't realize, cash flow comes into play. Inventory comes into play. Distribution, who kind of distributors are in, depending on the scale, but the smaller, middle size to lower tier 2, tier 3 manufacturers, they're not very they're not public. They're usually private. Private, smaller companies, they don't have all the cash, the operating expenses, they can't spend on digital transformation. So and they actually, in my opinion, are doing they're the big pusher, especially in the States right now. A lot of the smaller guys have big increases because of a lot of the things have changed. A lot of people are pushing for equipment. You know that because you've been talking to a lot of.
Hey, Rob, though, isn't it strange that you talk about that, and the fact that you've still got to pick up the phone and do a deal, or you've still got to chase down that particular component? Isn't that just like what we talked about in the exhibition industry? What comes back is a hybrid model that's digitally enabled, but awesome people with expertise talking to other people, leveraging their relationships, and getting stuff done. We can do all this digital transformation, but we're not going to leave it to the computers. And at the end of the day, we're going to use that to augment what we can do and allow us to do an even better job. And that's, I think that's a really important takeaway from digital transformation. It's not about replacing people. It's about us being the augmented best version of ourselves we can possibly be, and using all that digital transformation, all that data to fuel change and to allow us to do a better job, make a better decision, and make that decision faster. And that's where everybody wins.
I cannot agree more, and I can't agree. Thank you for that. I mean, I can't believe we've spent 1 hour already. We've gone through to talk.
I know we could talk all day, Rob.
We could talk all day, but get into the wrap, because we can do. There could be a part 2, part 3, part 4. I can talk to you forever, because I'm curious, and you have a lot of wisdom and a lot of information. So
I'm curious too. Curiosity is key.
Yeah, curiosity is key. That's we keep moving forward. But really, coming to the end, really, what do you see for 2 things? For EMSNow, let's go for 2 ways. EMSNow and your guys' future, and Scoop as well, as you're doing journalistic, moving forward in the next year or 2, really, what's your guys' forecast for your production or some customers? What are you guys trying to change in the model to, get more viewership and things like that?
Yeah, I think what we've learned this year has been really valuable, and we're starting to put together more and more shows, and we're starting to put together more stuff that delivers that value to our customers. So when you look at any publication, publications are just like trade shows. Our audience are like trade show visitors, and our advertisers are just like exhibitors. So we've got to deliver their message in a compelling way to the market and to a targeted market. So our job is to create vehicles that allow them to do that, and it maybe brings several of them together, in terms of a panel, in terms of a podcast. It maybe brings something that's serialized, like a regular show that allows them to pick up regular lead generation and all those kind of things. And I see us doing more and more of that, and worrying less about those kind of big flagpole events like the trade shows and having to go to those. But to me, it's always been this journalistic endeavor of delivering their message within a piece of compelling content to a focused audience. So, if their market is tens of thousands of companies, then great, we go after tens of thousands of companies. But that's rarely the case. What's more and more the case now is that people know who their target companies are. I look at lead generation as this sliding scale, and if you think of someone at Electronica that's walked onto your booth, one of those 100,000 people that have been at that show and walked onto your booth, they have a certain value. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got someone that walked onto your booth with a purchase order and a check, and that's the transaction. And we just need to push the work we do as far along this scale as possible. So we're delivering leads that are as near to transaction as possible, because then that's the value that the customers get. And the audience get the value because they're getting the content, they're getting the insight. We're bringing the right people to them. We're bringing my network of contacts in front of them in terms of opinion pieces. We're bringing technical information to them. So there's value for everyone, and it's a virtuous circle. The more you do of each part, the more it fuels the rest. So you invest in content, you win more advertising, you generate more revenue, you can invest more.
Yeah, I agree. And as I said, you're going to that's like, you have to curate it and go where the people are at. You have to be where the people are at, where the customers are at, right? I think with all the data that goes in data acquisition, again, you figure out who is your clientele, where is the circle where you can push the data content and target it to be where the people are at. End of the day, as I always say, if you're not where the people are at, how can you get more prospecting? How can you get more business? You have to be a network where the people are at and show your service or your product.
Absolutely.
Or
yeah. And when I look at that from a Scoop point of view, it might be as simple as someone that is making a particular piece of equipment saying, hey, I'd really love to be talking to someone at this particular company. And I'm like, okay, well, you're a leader in terms of using that technology in the industry. Let's get you on a panel with the person in that company that actually talks about that. And they'll meet each other on the panel. There'll be some discussion afterwards. And before you know it, they've at least had the opportunity to develop a relationship that's potentially business. And, when I look at those level of introductions, they're much closer on that scale to being transactional. They're much more valuable. But 9 times out of 10, they're as valuable to the EMS or the OEM or the potential customer as they are to the supplier, because you're bringing something new to them. You're bringing something that's valuable, and it's almost that one-to-one marketing tool where this guy wants to sell to this guy, and actually this guy wants to buy from this guy, but he's never met him or heard of him before. And if you can be the person that does that, and then you can scale that to a larger peer-to-peer model, then I think it starts to make sense. And there are all the digital tools for us to do that. We can use Zoom Info, or we can use LinkedIn to make sure that we're inviting the right people to an event. And then the people that decide to attend have got a level of qualification. Those that attend and ask questions have got an even better level of qualification. So, I think it's that virtual circle. And from a personal point of view, it's all about telling the story and the excitement you get when actually the story really gels between the company that's doing something really clever and the company that needs that solution.
It's a full circle, telling the story, connecting. And that's it's just the 360.
That's it.
And connecting, and that's where it brings the fulfillment, the success, the awareness, and it all comes to there. Well, very good. That's all. It is a full circle. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I really appreciate your time. We're gonna do some. I got to bring you back on.
We're gonna do some more of these.
Some more.
I'll get you on one of my shows too.
Yeah,
it'll be a lot of fun.
It'll be a lot of fun. But do you have anything else? Do you have any quotes or mantras that you'd like to leave us with?
One of my mantras, and I guess it's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is my dearly departed father always said to me when I was a kid, and it was when I was leaving school and trying to figure out what I could do. He always said to me, you can do whatever you want. It was this idea that whatever industry you want to go into, it's always shrouded in mystery, and it's like, wow, how does that work? How does the semiconductor industry work? That's crazy. They're taking sand and glass and they're making electronics from them. Just go find out, and you can do it. You can do whatever you want. Just be innovative, be creative. I've always loved that as a strategy.
I love it. You can do whatever you want, and it's simple as that. It's simple as I love it. Thank you so much. And as with my mantra is be smart, be thoughtful, be generous. Thank you,
There
Philip.
you go.
I cannot wait to be in contact with you. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure.